Hi, I'm Lewis, also known as Skeffles, and this is the 14th devlog for my tower defense game, Project Torrim. In the last devlog, I worked on quite a few bug fixes and usability issues with the level editor, and started looking into saving additional data for the level objects and tiles. Including the additional data into the save file resulted in a messy mix of CSV and JSON formatting, so this week I decided to look into updating the save and load functionality to only utilise JSON serialization. To do this, I began by looking into just serializing the level objects themselves. Unfortunately, due to the heavy reliance on inheritance with the base game object, I felt that serializing the actual game objects as is wasn't going to work. So I looked into ways to customize what gets serialized. The first thing I looked at was JSON ignore attributes. Place one of these on a property and it just won't be serialized. These are great, but for my game objects, they wouldn't be feasible because not all the objects would want to have the same set of ignores from their parent classes. I then looked into custom JSON converters. These are essentially functions you can provide to the serializer to take over the reading and writing process for the memory stream, meaning you can manually pick and choose which properties you're interested in. However, I wasn't keen on this approach and was unsure how collections would work with it. So in the end, I decided to implement a properties class for each of the game objects I wanted to serialize. This is an easily serializable class which controls all the properties each object is interested in. I then added functions to populate and read these classes to each game object. Whilst this approach isn't standard and probably isn't great for performance, I like it. It allows me to control what is serialized much better than just attempting it with my game objects, and is further abstracted away from the serialization process than the custom converters. With this all done, my levels can now be saved and loaded with a JSON format, which I think is much better than before. It's certainly going to be easier to expand on what gets saved in the future. For example, all the blank grid squares currently have this default JSON element. If I'm worried about, say, file size, then I could add indices to all of my placed objects and completely remove all of the blank grid squares from the file. After getting serialization working, I took a look at what was left on my Trello board. The board was looking good, just a few tasks left. However, I felt that the board wasn't very relevant at this point in the level editor, so I gave it a quick reorganize. So at this point, I only have tweak and nice to have tasks left. The tweaks are mostly bugs and usability issues that shouldn't take too long, whilst the nice to haves are mostly non-crucial ideas that will make using the editor a lot nicer. My aim is to get all of the tweaks done before moving back to developing the content for Project Torrim, and then I'll review the nice to haves before deciding whether or not to release the editor with the game. To finish this week off, I took a look at some of the tweaks that I had in my list. The first tweak I worked on was the panel scrolling issue, in which when you scrolled through the tiles at the bottom of the editor, the entire panel would move with them. To fix this, I just made it so that the panel sprite didn't update its position after it's been moved. The next tweak was to give some context to the mode button. Too often I found myself forgetting which mode it's on, so to fix this, I added the text to show which mode the editor is on. So here is object mode, and here's tile mode. The last tweak I worked on this week was to highlight the active tile selection buttons. The buttons always look the same, and after a while you might forget which tile you have selected. This was fixed by changing the colour of the button for the selected tile. Unfortunately, bigger sprites cover this up, but I think I can address this in the future by scaling down sprites to fit the buttons. Looking back at this week, I feel that I didn't get much progress, because a lot of my changes covered ground I'd already covered. That being said, I feel like I've done a much better job of covering it. Looking forward, I think the level editor is approaching its final stages, and I'll soon be able to use it to develop content for Project Torrim, which is very exciting. Thank you for watching the 14th devlog for Project Torrim. Leave the video a like to let me know you enjoyed it, comment to give me feedback, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with the progress on the game. Thank you, and goodbye.